Hey, let's talk game design.
Yeah.
All right, me and Steve are once again here at Tuesday night down in the basement talking about wargaming, and tonight we're gonna have whatever she's saying too. So well, let's get our guest here. All right, joining us tonight, straight out of Enid, man, the myth, Fan Ace himself.
Be dancing.
Yeah,
I feel like I should come in with like a feathered fan or something after that music.
Yeah. The Phantom Ace himself, David Phipps.
Don't dare me to do it because I'll do it.
Yeah. So before we talk to David here, I got a little quick thing for those who don't know Pulp Alley. Here's a little quick teaser. I stole those images without David's permission, but we needed something. So.
Is that the official Pulp Alley theme song?
It is now.
It is now.
Now.
So
very cool.
So anyway, I'm glad to have David here tonight. He's gracious enough to come.
Yeah,
on.
thanks.
He's got a little kid. He's taken time away to be with us tonight. I first met him at Recruits because I was running an 8-person Pulp Alley game on this big like volcano island sort of thing with a bunch of the teams that I had made, and I just got into Pulp Alley and I started posting pictures of the different teams I had put together. And David contacted me because he thought some of them were pretty cool. So, anyway, if anyone tonight has questions for me or for David, put them over in the chat there. But tell us a little about yourself, sir.
Oh gosh, Jay, I don't know what to really go over. I live in Enid, Oklahoma. Got into miniatures wargaming as a young person, and I just kept doing it. You remember those old? I guess if I go back far enough, I guess like what really got me started down this path was probably those old Avalon Hill bookcase games.
Oh yeah,
those Squad Leader and Blitzkrieg and on and on and on. Those were probably my gateway drug into this path. So good stuff. I don't really talk about myself. That's kind of
well, you're in a bad place because that's what we're going to make you do. So I think
all night long.
I think a lot of us, that's exactly how we got started. For me, it was a little bit of D&D and painting up miniatures to play with my guys, and then making my own rules for that. But the old SBI games, the old Avalon Hill games. I also had the old TSR games that came in the little tiny plastic blister cases.
Yeah,
that I think Ogre originally came in, and Assault on Antares and stuff, and then kind of went from there. I wrote my rules out of anger because of my first war game convention I went to, and was sort of frustrated with the guy who was putting on a cowboy game, so I decided to write my own. Yeah. But so why did you write your rules? Because
I guess it's the same story, Jay, isn't it? It was basically the idea that for me, I was kind of disappointed with the direction I was seeing a lot of miniatures gaming going, and I don't know, this really sounds bad, but I was just seeing the miniatures gaming was just the rules were getting dumber and dumber and dumber, and things kept getting kind of dumbed down. And I thought, you can make the game fast and fun to play without making it, so goofy.
Yeah.
So it was basically out of frustration with the other games that I was seeing, and I said, you know what, we're going to do something that we actually want to play, and that's kind of where Pulp Alley was born.
So I mean, so Pulp Alley is. I should say it's very specific to the pulp era because I know lots of people that have taken it into other genres and used the mechanics for it.
Right.
So, what's sort of your connection? And so I'm going to write my own. I'm going to write my first published war game rules. Why am I choosing this period?
Well, I don't think it's any surprise to y'all that I had worked with Sean and Robbie on the Ambush Alley rules. So I guess really that would kind of be our first published game.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun working on that. I guess when we started thinking about, we wanted to do a game that was smaller in scale or in scope, and where you had a smaller number of figures on the table, and we started looking around at different genres. And, do we want to do a Western? That was one that was pretty high on the list of things that we had considered doing. And just looking around at those sort of things. And then Pulp kind of bubbled to the surface. And for me, Pulp is a very wide net. It's not simply an intra-war or a 1930s style. It is, Pulp is horror. Pulp is war tales. Pulp is science fiction. Pulp is high adventure, on and on and on. So for me, it was kind of a setting, but it was broader than that. It cast a very large net. And I'm one of those folks, probably like a lot of people are. Every time I see a new movie, I want to go game that. I see a Western, or I see a Roman movie, or Three Musketeers. I want to go game that, and all of those things could be played under that Pulp umbrella.
Yeah, and like you said, because I was going to ask you, because you've been, God, how long has Pulp Alley been around? 10 years?
My poster up here says it was released in March 14th, 2013.
Okay. So 8 years. And in that 8 years, you've been, at first I was going to say, very focused on the pulp era. But like you said, that casts a way broader net in the fact that you do have rules for horror. I know you've run games that are like paranormal type things. You've done not just gangsters, but the classic sort of
cops and robbers,
hero, cops and robbers stuff. Yep. And I know I've done it and taken into like space and things like that. So yes. I feel like even though you've been very focused on your period, it's not just gangsters and the shadow and all that kind of stuff,
correct,
matinee kind of heroes,
right?
You're only limited by your imagination.
Yeah. Which I found from my side, there's not a whole lot of that. So. But one smart thing that you've done is you have actually released several sort of pre-made character packs and stuff like that, so that people can just take them and go. And you're not you're miniature agnostic, although there are obviously 2 or 3 miniature manufacturers that slide easily into what you're writing.
Yeah.
So I mean, but I think you can use whatever you want. I know from my point that the leagues that I've created, I used everything. I've got my Pecos
Yeah.
Pete and the Giddy Up Gang that's like mostly just, cowboys and stuff like that, even though he's a Saturday morning matinee star who's technically a secret agent that uses that as
I love that. Yeah, that's a great one.
undercover. I've got my own Phantom Ace. It's called the Red Raptor, and his dog Ace. And then, of course, the ground support crew and things like that. And I've got my own little evil empire and all those sort of things. So,
Yeah. That was
beyond
a big influence, the cereals, and we say the pulps, but
Yeah.
I kind of loop the cereals in there too, and they're two very distinct things. But I love the leagues that you've made up. Those are awesome and definitely within the flavor. And you're right, when I'm writing, when most of the time when I'm playing, the setting is the 1930s.
Yeah.
I almost specifically stick to the early 1930s. But every once in a while, we go out on a wild hare and we'll do a Western. And we even have a few videos that have a Western on there. We have a post-apocalyptic setting that we've done. And there are a few videos of those games out there on the internet too. So space and obviously horror is fairly big in the pulp setting as well.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So because you mentioned videos, I'm just going to say, one, subscribe to the Pulp Alley channel. But not only do you talk about your games and you do these great run throughs of the mechanics and scenarios you've created, but you also do a lot of videos on the terrain that you use and how you make terrain, models. And I know you did one that was just on like cars and vehicles and where you're sourcing them from. Now I know with at least 3D printing has changed my life. There's a lot of stuff now that you can just print, but you give a lot of videos on how you're taking different sets from different companies and and doing that.
What kind of printer do you use, Jay? Do you have your own 3D printer?
Yeah, I've got two. One for terrain, I use an Ender 3. And I just use that for terrain. So for this weekend, for Wiley War Games weekend, I printed out two Victoria. They're technically for Harry Potter, but they're so works good for Victorian London also. So I've got two of those buildings, and because on the Thames, I've got a little
very cool
a steamer, which could also work for pulp period too. So and walls and stuff like that. So over COVID, I was able to just print, and was able to. If you've seen any of our videos on our Star Wars games, I can fill like an 8x6 table easy with all the stuff we printed.
Wow.
For miniatures, I use a Elegoo Mars. And
that sounds like the two names that keep popping up over and over again.
They're really good.
I've asked several people, and those are
really good intro level stuff. They're not too complicated. They're pretty. They can be, for the most part, pretty friendly, and also they both have a large community that supports it. So if something goes wrong or breaks, there's usually somebody that's like, you show them a picture in your settings, and they're like, you need to do this. So
very cool.
Oh, good. We got somebody. Charles here is just subscribed to you, and
thank you.
Yes, and Kenneth said that he's played Pirates with Pulp Alley, so that just shows you. So when we're talking about the sort of diversity of the game, let's talk mechanics. So you said you'd worked on Ambush Alley, and I think I knew that because I think I remember when they came up to recruits. So I love Pulp Alley's mechanics. So if you could talk briefly No, you don't have to talk briefly. We got lots of time.
Briefly, huh?
No, don't talk briefly because we got lots of time.
We don't have a time limit.
Yeah, we usually go about an hour and a half. So, so if you could talk about one, the mechanics of the game, but then also what kind of inspired you to pick what you did, because it's very unique. I could see parts and pieces from other places, but not used the way you have. And also, I'll probably interject because I think there's some parts to it that are just genius that make it the game that it is. That makes it kind of hard to replicate. So,
well, when Mila and I first started working on the game, and Mila, my daughter,
the Phipps and daughter,
we made a list of things that we felt were important, and things like, I don't want to look at a chart while I'm playing the game. So Pulp Alley is designed. That's one of the things about Pulp Alley, is that during the game, while you are playing, you should absolutely never have to look at a chart or a table. That's just one of those kind of pet peeves of mine that we didn't want to have in there. One that Mila came up with, and this is a funny one, is that we never use any abbreviations. And you see this in like so many skirmish games or war games.
Yeah, MV.
Right?
You know,
your
MS,
roll your MEL, you know, and it's like, what? I don't know what that means, you know?
Yeah.
It's like that secret code. It's like a cult, you know, where cults have, you know, their own special secret language.
Well, yeah, that's why it's great. You can sit there and look at the character card and it says shoot. Oh, I know.
Right. Right. And that's why in Pulp Alley, everything is spelled out, you know. When you look at the character and you look at the skill list, nothing is abbreviated. It's all spelled out, and you can look at it and you can know exactly what it means. So it's like that level of trying to like trim off some of the things that we really didn't like about other games and kind of make sure they're playable. When we were looking at fighting, and this was probably one of those things that kind of started this ball rolling for us, when we looked at how fighting was resolved in a lot of skirmish games, even in role-playing games, there was this constant I go, you go sort of thing where I'm going to attack you right now, and I'll roll to hit, and I'll let you know how much damage I do, and you just sit there, and if you're on in the turn, if you're still alive, I'll let you attack me, and I'll just stand here.
Yeah. Like I rolled a hit. I rolled a wound. I rolled a. You might get to roll your armor or something.
Right, right.
But that's wonderful.
It's basically like attacking a fence post or a punching bag.
Sure.
That's how fights are treated in so many skirmish games, and it's just like it takes the defender, who should be an active part of the fight. You know, in my opinion, the defender is really part of the fight. And it comes from going back and watching those old Toshiro Mifune samurai movies, or even like your Clint Eastwood Westerns and stuff. So often your Bruce Lee martial arts movies, so often the goons come in on the hero, you know, and you could say it's their activation. They're coming in and attacking the hero, and whack, you know, that goon goes down. And this goon comes in and whack, that goon goes down. So we started saying to ourselves, well, the defender should really have the option to counterattack. So we started trying to make sure that when we were watching the movies, that we could actually recreate that fight in Pulp Alley.
And there's a reason, and then there's also some thought that you have to do as a defender, because
yes,
Pulp Alley, if you choose to fight back, there's going to be a detriment later on in the turn. So you got to think there's a risk reward to what I'm doing.
And that's probably the secret word right there that you said, or the secret phase, risk reward. That is just like a huge thing in Pulp Alley, which you're constantly weighing, right? So the attacker comes in and attacks you. So now as the defender, I have options. I can decide either to go full defensive and just try and use my dodge skill and try to avoid getting hurt, or I can counterattack as the defender and try to fight back. So there's a lot of those sort of give and take. What are you willing to risk at that moment? And that's where you really have to think about what's happening right at this moment in the game. Do I need to try and keep this character alive, or can I sacrifice this character to try to cause some damage to the opponent? So there's all of those things that you're constantly weighing when you're playing Pulp Alley. It makes it a lot of fun and very engaging. I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say it's a very genius move because Pulp Alley or Pulp, and especially Pulp serials, are built on cliffhangers, and it's very much cliffhanger decisions that you're making.
Yes. And if you respond to that attack, you have a little detriment later on because if you shoot back or if you fight, then you have less dice to deal with.
You're exactly right
on the next fight.
And that's a way that weaker characters can actually wear a more powerful character down because you have a -1 penalty for each previous fight that you've been in. So if I send one bad guy in on you, you could probably knock him down with your hero. When your second guy gets there, now you're at a -1. When the third guy gets there, you're at a -2. And the third
exactly. And I've run games before where they're just like, man, I can't take down this hero. And I'm like, because you're not doing it right. You got to wear him down. This guy is larger than this guy or gal is larger than life. You have to be able to, if you have to make a concerted effort to bring this person down. And you don't really need to, because most of the Pulp Alley games, at least the way I think you've written scenarios and the way I've run them before, the scenario isn't about taking out Doc Savage. It's about accomplishing whatever the game scenario says.
Yes.
So you could waste all your time trying to take this guy down, but for the most part, you've only got 6 or 7 turns. Yep. You're going to lose the game because that guy is using his hero to draw your attention while his minions are out running around, shutting down the death ray, fighting the secret temple, all that kind of stuff.
It's pushing storytelling over those two. It's making people do storytelling over those two awful, dreaded words that we absolutely hate, and that's point system.
Yeah. Even after you roll the dice in a fight, there's still decisions to make. Like as the attacker, when you come in and attack somebody and they roll and they reply and they roll their dice, whether they're counterattacking or trying to dodge, let's say they're counterattacking. You come in and attack somebody and they try to counterattack. As the attacker, as the active character, you can choose to knock out some of their dice by sacrificing some of your dice. So that risk reward idea gets back in there again, because if you want to play it safe, you could say, well, I'm going to knock out both of your hits, but you do that at the cost of reducing your offensive capabilities and your chances of getting some damage through. But you can go berserk and say, just take them all. And then you can deliver all of your hits to the enemy. But that means that you're taking as many hits as they rolled back.
Mutually assured destruction.
Yes.
Well, and the shooting is similar in that.
Yes, exactly.
Like I could dodge out of the way, or I could try to return fire and hopefully hurt you.
Right. And what that represents is characters either choosing, like, let's say you're standing next to a wall or whatever. Are you standing in the open just blazing away with everything you got? Or are you using that cover to pop out and pop a couple shots? It's that sort of decision that you're making. How dangerous are you at that moment in the game? Or how dangerous do you want to make it? So and it's a simple mechanic that elegantly captures all that without having to explain all that. And to touch on, we're talking about shooting. You said no charts, and
the thing that I love about this is that there aren't any guns listed and gun ranges and all that kind of stuff. If you have a shoot factor, you don't specify that this guy's carrying this gun or this gun. The whatever you've assigned based on that guy's level, how many dice that you've given him and all that is what he's fighting with and how good he is all rolled into one. So it could be a native with a spear, be a guy with a Tommy gun. It's all how they've been statted up for the game, and it's all pretty simple. We'll get into character building here in a little bit, but for people who don't know, Pulp Alley uses a few different types of dice, and you use, I don't want to say dice pools, but you get multiple dice for each of your characteristics on each character. So, and then of course the better characters have more, and you're going down the totem pole, you get less and less.
Yep.
So how, when you were thinking about when you were developing this, when you were first writing the rules, how did you come up with that mechanic or decide on that mechanic?
It was really to give me a way to, it does really two things. One, the higher dice type. So if a hero is rolling a D10, and frequently he may be rolling the same number of dice as a lower level character. So he's not necessarily always rolling more. He frequently does, but he's also rolling a bigger dice type. And then what that does is if you're actually trying to dodge or avoid damage, you have to roll equal or higher to what your opponent rolled. So that means that the hero, your Flash Gordons, your Indiana Jones, and those sort of characters, when they're fighting someone, it puts them at even more of a disadvantage. It makes the larger than life characters even more larger than life because they're getting.
There is a small chance that goon can actually hit him. Ever so small. There is still a chance.
Yes,
but it's always weighted for the hero.
Yeah.
Juan Jorge.
So for example, if a goon is trying to dodge a hero's dice and the hero rolls a 9 or a 10 on his D10s, well, then the goon has no chance. He's doomed. He's not going to block those 9s or 10s with his D6s. So the hero is getting through. The other thing that it does is it gives me an opportunity to show how heroes get injured and how it brings them down a notch.
Yeah.
So in Pulp Alley, you cannot roll a dice type that is higher than your current health level. So we measure health in dice types. So if your health goes down to a D8, then you can no longer roll your D10s anymore.
Yeah, even if you have a D10, you can't roll it because you need to stay at your health level.
Right. And once a hero gets wounded again and drops down to a D6 health, now they can't roll any dice bigger than a D6. They can't even roll a D8 or a D10. Yeah. So that shows how their health has declined. And there were old board games that I played that I really liked that sort of stuff in. I don't know if anybody out there remembers an old board game. It was by Standard Games called Cry Havoc.
Oh, yeah.
Remember those beautiful tokens that they had?
Yeah.
And you flipped them over. Like the knight would start out on one side. And this is like back in the...
It was played on I can't remember if it was a grid or a hex, but you played on
I think it was hexes. Yeah. And then when the knight got injured, you'd flip it over to the other side, and that was his injured side.
Weakened version, yeah.
His weakened version. And then if they were mounted, they had 2 mounted sides as well. Yeah. So it was really cool, and I liked that idea. And you don't see it very much. You don't see it in very many games, but I really liked that idea. But I wanted to do it in a nice, easy way. So that's the way we do it. If your health is down to a D6, then that means you can only roll D6s.
Yeah.
Again,
a very elegant way to handle a complex sort of complex idea, but without having to throw in a bunch of like extraneous rules.
It's a very
hold
good,
on. I'm just gonna cover a few comments we had. Weird World War II said Pulp Alley is a great game. I am win one loss with you, Dave. Got to get back in the ring again.
Hey, Brian, how you doing? Brian down in Texas.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He also said it's very mission oriented, which I love. Steve, he wants to know what you're painting.
I'm painting. I finished King Randor for Masters of the Universe, and then everything else is Star Wars Rogues Gallery stuff. But I need to bust out all my pulp stuff and start painting on that, which is underneath my desk here.
Yeah. So, and then Minnie Warmut said we've got him shopping at the Pulp Alley store, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And then Kenneth mentions the cards that are involved in this too. So there is a card element.
They're so good.
That I'm just going to say I don't think is intrusive, and I think it's you found a great way to kind of slide some extra stuff in there without making it too hard. So if you could touch on how cards are used in it.
Yeah, there's the normal hand of cards is the fortune cards. And what they do is they give you an opportunity to have fun little odd things happen.
Yep.
So we don't have to really have a rule for doing a sucker punch or something like that. But maybe you'll draw a card that says sucker punch on it. So when you get in a brawl with somebody, bam, you can throw that out there and get a little extra oomph out of it.
Yeah.
So the cards give you the opportunity to have fun little things happen during the game. Now, that being said, it was very important to us that the cards didn't dominate the game.
They're not overpowering.
Yeah. So honestly, you can collect your cards and you can sit them down in front of you and you can mostly ignore them for the game.
Well,
and it really doesn't matter. You know,
that's what happens. We play, people just forget.
Yeah,
they even got them. So
yeah, and I still do. I still forget sometimes when I have a card in my hand. So sometimes I'll have to pick it up and hold it just when that moment
just
comes
to remember that you have it.
Or we pick on somebody.
You know? We're just playing and having fun. If you forget to use a card, big deal. Yeah.
I've gotten you got a horror deck because I've got I have a bunch of them. I'm trying to remember all the ones I've got from you.
There's the horror deck. There's character cards. So we sell cards
that are
just the characters themselves.
Yeah.
Then we have blank cards. Like a lot of our character cards actually have a blank side on the back. So if you want to use our figures, but then make up your own stats, you can do that on the back of them too.
Yes.
There's the solo deck if you're a solo player, and that's been really popular lately.
Yeah. The last year and a half, I could see why.
Yeah. The solo cards. And there are a few videos out there of us using the solo deck. We did a really fun kind of Robert E. Howard Conan-esque sort of game, and it's split over I think 3 different videos, and that was played solo. We did a Western that was played solo. I have somebody knocking at my door. I'll be right back.
Hey, it's just me, everybody. So
people sometimes ask me what that is attached to my hat, and that's my microphone. Thank you. Bye.
So
regardless of where I go, you can hear me perfectly fine.
Well, don't go to the bathroom. I made that mistake.
I know, crystal clear. You'll hear the running water, crystal clear.
So Garm said we needed a Dash Dixon Time Warp crash land into the Phantom Ace campaign. Well, just so you know, me and Dave many moons ago talked about doing a video together where I would come and play a Pulp Alley game, and then he would in return play one of my games. We had it kind of locked down and then locked down, so that didn't happen.
I'd still love to do that with you sometime. Bring Steve along with you, and we'll have
Yes.
our
Sure.
own game weekend.
We'll go to the metropolis of Enid, Oklahoma.
And
Hey, I can't say much. I live in Independence, so yeah. I'm just gonna answer these real quick. Then I want to get back to you. Your buddy asked, does Wiley Games have some World War II tiles? If not, why not? I don't need them because much like my rules, it's a lot like Pulp Alley. It's all what you want to do with them. They are agnostic. We just ran a weird World War II game last Thursday, which you could watch on this very YouTube channel. We had
did you use your post-apocalypse rules, or?
So what we actually did was we used our Galactic Heroes rules because
Very cool.
has some extra traits in it. So we had Major Victory, and the rest of the Liberty Legion were going down to South America because the last of the Nazi hideouts, the holdouts, had found a old Aztec temple that they were trying to bring something through the warp, a la Hellboy. And so every player had a group of kind of soldiers, and then they had a super involved there. So, for instance, Major Victory we did a little bit to change up was all the heroes were veterans, so they all got to roll D12s, and they all got 3 powers or 3 traits. And so, for instance, we just gave him flight, gave him a range weapon, which was basically his Star-Spangled Vision, and we gave him another trait that made him tougher, like he had armor. His skin was armored or whatever. So they were more like Golden Age heroes in that there weren't any like overly powerful dudes, and we had Sergeant Stone, who was made out of rocks and stuff. So we didn't use anything that isn't in the books. It's just we've talked about this multiple times and multiple videos. It's all about if you want to pull something from here and some magic from here, all of our rules are the same. The core rules never change. It's all about what you want to pull into it. So yes, we do not have a dedicated World War II, but you don't need to. So, and then he also said, dig those special cards. That's what sent us to Dave. And yeah.
Amish War Discs available.
Yeah. And Pulp Alley has months worth of battle reports. So yes, go to his channel, like I pointed out before. Mini Warmuth just backed up what I said. And yeah, and then Garmas says, Dave still have any of the Amish War Disc available? I don't know what that means. But
hey, I just wanted to ask Dave on his website. Have you, when you started, were you selling miniatures from the very get-go?
I don't remember that. But
could you ask him again?
No,
he was asking if you originally sold miniatures when you first started. I didn't think so.
No, we didn't start with miniatures. We started just with the book, and then kind of got into miniatures a little bit later on. I can't really remember when we started doing miniatures, but it probably wasn't too far along. And Andrew Ray in Scotland was our first sculptor and did a bunch of our early figures. Just absolutely wonderful sculptor, and did a wonderful job for us. And since then, we've added a few other sculptors in there as well. But yeah. I started off mainly with like the cobblestone castings. They have a wonderful gangsters set. There's a bunch of really cool pulp figures in the artisan. In the artisan line, they have their Thrilling Tales set, and of course, Bob Murch's pulp figures line from Canada. He was really probably one of those early inspirations to say, you know what, we really ought to do a pulp game. There's an entire line of figures out here that although he does have his Rugged Adventures rule
Yeah.
set, we felt like, there's a whole line out there that could really deserve to
Well,
have
yeah, I know that he got
a rule
he
set.
got a ton of sales just because of your rules. In fact, I asked him about it one time at a convention, and he said, "Yeah." I think he was a little bit, I think he wished people reviewed more of his rules, but and I definitely think that Artisan, especially once Pulp Alley started catching on, increased their line that they do, their Thrilling Tales line. It is, and
Good stuff.
Walkabout Games. Yes, Bob is a really cool guy.
Yeah, no, he does.
And then someone asked if you had solo rules, and yes, you do. We just talked about that a little bit ago.
Yeah.
So
for the solo game, you replace the normal fortune deck with a specific purpose-built solo deck. So you do not use the fortune deck in the solo game. You use the solo deck.
I'm going to bring up another mechanics thing. So
Okay.
The idea of who holds initiative, I think, is very cool, and I'm gonna let you describe it, and then I'm gonna bring up the only problem I have with it, and it's not really a problem. It's my problem. So
it has to do with who is going to activate the next character, and what we looked at a lot of stuff that was out there, and a lot of different ways to do it. Who has the initiative and who's going to move first and things like that. Now, I guess first I would say in Pulp Alley, oftentimes you want the opponent to go first. So Pulp Alley is not one of those games that is like built around the idea that you want to go first. And one of the reasons that is because the defender can actually fight back. So it's not one of those I go, you go games. So just because you go first and you attack somebody, they could knock you down. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit off the point here. The way the initiative works is we have one player who's called the director, and the player that is called the director can change multiple times throughout the game and can change multiple times throughout the turn based on what happens, on the table. So if a character wins a fight, and I would say clearly wins a fight, which is a very specific thing, that's not a broad statement. If a character clearly wins a fight, then that player takes control, becomes the director. Or if you complete one of the plot points, which would be like the objectives in the scenario, like over here, you have to find this crate over here. So if you completed that and you drew a reward card, then you would become the director there. The power of being the director is that you get to decide which player is going to activate the next character. So it's not like you have to draw a bean out of a bag, or you don't have to draw a card. You don't have to do anything other than look at the table and say, you know what, Jay, I'm going to have you activate the next character. Mm-hmm. And it's a one thing. But remember this, when Jay activates that character, something could occur that allows him to take control of who's the director, right?
Yeah.
Jay could activate.
Risk reward once again.
Yeah, Jay could activate his leader, win a fight, and boom, now Jay's the director, and he gets to decide who's going to go. So the mechanic is very simple. It is very easy. It basically says that player gets to pick which other player gets to activate the next character, and they can pick themselves, right? I can say, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and go, which isn't always a good move, and you need to remember that when you're playing Pulp Alley. So that is the mechanic. You simply pick the player, and there's like a whole strategy around that. There's like so many tactics around that idea. Although I say it is a very simple and very easy rule, sometimes it's a real thinker. Sometimes you got to sit there and go, you know what? I can't let Jay go first, because if Jay goes, he's going to run over there and grab that plot point, and then he'll become the director, and then he'll do this and this and this. So you have to think through those things a little bit. So you go, I don't want him to become the director, so I'm going to do this instead. So there's a lot of strategy and tactics in the game around trying to be the director and trying to take it away from the other guy when he's the director.
Yeah. So again, very, very simple mechanic, but also elegantly does, handles or what. So what I was going to say is, because I don't get to play a lot of 2-player games and I don't get to play a lot of 4-player games. So what I had to start instituting was, I have the little totem here, which kind of looks like me on purpose. And so what I had to do, and I learned this from running that 8-person game at Recruits for Pulp Alley, was whoever had initiative, the director has to hold this in their hand. You can't set it down.
Yeah.
You have to hold on to it. And that makes them remember you have initiative, because what we found out is the guy would either assign it to somebody else and forget that they had the ability to, whoa, no, I want him to go. So what I made them do is they have to hold on to this sucker.
Yep.
And then when initiative changes, then you have to hand it off to somebody else to hold on to it. So,
yeah. The one we use here at Casa Pulp Alley is even
there we go.
Bigger and uglier.
Yeah.
It says director on it, a big megaphone director's cone, a la, classic Hollywood.
Yeah.
So that's what we use to kind of
hand
to people and make them take it. And I've seen people use a lot of different props.
Yeah.
Yours is awesome. We've used like a little Maltese falcon sort of statue.
Yeah, it should be geared to whatever the theme is,
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing a colonial game, you have to wear a pith helmet. So
there you go. Yeah. Yeah. On and on like that. No, you're exactly right. It does require the players to actually be engaged with the game. You're exactly right. I mean, you really can't hardly get to a much simpler, easy thing to do than to simply say, Jay, I want you to activate a character. That's not a difficult thing to do, but the idea that you do have to be engaged enough to remember who.
Yeah, as one of the players, that's
right.
You have to be thinking about what you're going to do, because it may switch to you. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, yeah, I gotta do it. So
I think
you as a guy who's maybe not even has initiative right now, need to constantly be thinking about, what if I get it next?
Yes.
Or, how I'm going to react if my guy gets suddenly attacked.
We designed Pulp Alley, and we say 1 to 4 players. It has always been designed for 1 to 4 players.
Yep.
I have played the most. Now, other than helping you just a little bit at Recruits at one time, the most I've ever had around the table is 6.
Yeah.
Not including myself, 6 other players. And Jay, Pulp Alley is such a dynamic and engaging game, and you're like constantly like doing stuff, and it's like a serial where it's just rolling,
Exactly.
It wears me out. I can't do. I can barely survive a 6-player game. A fat old guy like me should not be up running around the table like that much.
Well, maybe it won't make you. You'll leave some light running around. I hear you. I'm not this weekend. I'm looking forward to and not looking forward to, because there's going to be 3 games going on at once, and I can only be at one of them at any given time. So but luckily, I think you developed a game that once you know how to play it, you don't need to be there, and hopefully that's the way my game is too. To where, and my guys have played enough of my stuff that I don't really have to, other than answer weird specific questions about traits and stuff like that. So
and the rules are, it's like if you're playing Pulp Alley and you're not sure of something, the rules are very easy to understand. It's not like you said earlier. There's no abbreviations for things. It's like if you have a specific question about something, boom, you can find them.
Yeah, the core of the rules is actually not very it's not very long. I mean, it's not, this book is a substantial book. The actual mechanics of the rules is a very small amount of it. The rest of it is all packed with scenarios and examples of how stuff works, and basically kind of bonus
Character
material
creation.
and setting material. So
Yeah, character creation is at the front of it.
So Garm wants to know, I did that whole show on games other people's games that I play. So is there any other system that you play when you're not feeling Pulp Alley? Or just as a mental break, because sometimes I
really enjoy role-playing games, and I still like playing role-playing games. It's hard for me to play too many other miniatures games because I keep trying to want to do things that they don't let me do.
Yeah.
But I love stuff like Rune Quest, the old Rune Quest. I like Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
I like Pendragon.
Oh God, I still got my original Pendragon box and everything.
I think those are great games. Those Chaosium really had my number. They released a lot of fun stuff.
I always had
I
beautifully
really
designed
enjoyed.
stuff too. Yeah, we've been playing over the last 18 months. We've been playing the one thing that we've had, especially for a large chunk of it, we couldn't play in person. We've been playing D&D and some other games over the course of it. And last Thursday before last was our giant culmination of our quest that we'd been on for all these months. So that was a lot of fun to play. Surprisingly, no one died, but
I used to play a lot of I used to play a lot of miniatures games. I was a huge Car Wars fan. I would travel around to conventions and play Car Wars specifically.
I tried to go back and play it again, and I was like, man, there are other. This is so old school now. You know, I've moved on to other rule sets that do the same thing and way easier. But moving around those little squares and then marking off all the stuff that your cards damage and stuff.
Yeah. No, I have come to terms. I have come to terms with Car Wars, and it's one of those games that I fell in love with the concept, and the game mechanics ceased to be as important. And unfortunately, you see that a lot in gaming. You know, that people just like the concept of a grim future of space marines and weird aliens doing battle, and that's a cool concept. And then you get to the mechanics of the game, and they have to kind of forgive a lot because it doesn't really represent it very well.
Well, that's why I think there's been here recently a lot of people who have come up with alternatives, using those miniatures but not playing those rules. A lot of people use Galactic Heroes. There's people that use one-page rules. There's people that use I think it's Space Weirdos. There's so many miniature agnostic things that I think people are catching on to, but there's still always a segment of these are the miniatures, these are the rules, and so this is what I'm going to play, and please tell me how to paint this and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what I like seeing is you and I have a lot of the same miniatures, and how we've painted those miniatures and how we've written.
Very different.
Our backgrounds are completely different for doing the same thing, and I love seeing that kind of diversity with how the miniatures and stuff are used. So
yeah, for sure. That's really true. And I even do that occasionally with our own figures. I have no problem with taking my Phantom Ace figure and renaming him something else and using him with different stats, and it's just part of the fun.
Putting a jetpack on him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone had asked, I'm sorry, Not Jay. Hey, subscribe to Not Jay. Outside of pulp, what's your favorite genre, historical period?
Well, I really like the 1066 sort of historical period, like
Yep.
the Norman invasion and that sort of setting. I think that there's a lot of stuff there. There's a relatively new game called Baron's War that
Yep. It's
I've
by
fallen in love with the figures that they've released for that. And there's a lot of cool
Footsore.
stuff.
Yeah, Footsore puts them out. I believe.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, I love that period. The Baron's War. Read a lot of read a lot of history books on that, and I'm a huge Norman Conquest thing. My dream is to do a big campaign with each person taking a different faction. You've got Normans, you've got Saxons, you've got Vikings, you've got
that would be
Scots,
fun.
you've got Welsh, you've got kind of what Saga has done, but not using Saga, but actually making a real sort of campaign around it, sort of thing. But I think
kind of goes back to the old Pendragon days too. If you
and I love that it was a mythological, Arthurian, it was the romantic Arthurian rules, which I loved. What Dan Mersey did when he wrote that period he did for it's the Italian guy that wrote the rule system, but he set it up that you could play it either as a purely historical King Arthur, 5th century warlord. You could play it as the romantic 14th century Arthur, or you could play it as a mystical Merlin with magic and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I love being able to do that kind of thing.
And then you have a really wide variety in there, and you can play it try to do it so historical, or within that kind of framework. And then in the next game you can have a giant come stomping through, or you could fall into the into a Sealy court or something like that.
Yeah, and have you ever thought about? Well, you can do it with Pulp Alley. I know because I've done Dark Ages stuff with Pulp Alley before. Because again, you just have to, it's how you stat up the things. Garm said his favorite old episode of Pulp Alley Halloween, one with evil pumpkins laugh my ass off with your reoccurring.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we do a yearly hunting of the revenants. It's a Victorian zombie hunt that we do once a year. So we'll probably tape that one this time. So there we go. Song of Blades and Heroes. Thank you, Ken. I was trying to think of it. So yeah, Song of Blades and Heroes. Dan Mersey of the Lion Rampant Rules fame. He had written a set for that. That's Arthurian stuff, and I love the Dark Ages stuff because it could easily be fantasy and men have gone
just really gritty and dirty about it. It just feels.
That's why I love Harn.
Right. Oh my gosh, Harnmaster! I dug out my Harnmaster recently.
There's the map right there, baby.
Oh, lovely! That's a game that roll your EML. You're full of abbreviations.
Yeah, the rules themselves are kind of but one of the things that I liked about it was getting in a fight was the last thing you wanted to do.
I know, yeah.
Because if you got injured, you stayed injured. So you got a sword wound to your left arm. You're never going to hold that shield the same way again, and your armor class is low. Or you get a hit to the leg, and it might only cost you a couple of hit points, but now your movement is reduced forever. Yeah. Oh, and it may come back later and get infected, and you'll die. So it was
brutally realistic.
It was brutally realistic.
It almost made it unplayable, and in some ways it did make it unplayable. It's almost like like the first edition of Boot Hill, your characters
You
just
got shot in the
died.
groin in that.
You just got shot and you're dead.
Yeah. Well, that's part of what would have happened. Yeah.
That's just like how it went.
I always seem to get shot in the groin in that game. I mean, because you had that random location thing, and it was like, okay, how many times am I going to get shot in the groin?
The old groin shot.
Yeah.
I was looking at Hardmaster recently, and I started trying to wonder whether or not I had subconsciously remembered that when I was working on Pulp Alley, because again, in Hardmaster, you have those options. So when you attack somebody, the defender has choices to make. They can either counterattack, or they can try to block. That would be a defend move. So it was like, wow, I
really,
that was there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've gone, like you said, with Car Wars, I have gone back to some of my old favorites, especially we did over the break. I ran a couple of Villains and Vigilantes games, which
gosh, wow.
Which I used to run all the time, like in high school and stuff.
But
going back and playing that, it's weird. It's a really strange sequence of how you play and stuff, and it's also one that can be pretty brutal. It can be unbalanced and stuff. So the one that I ran, I had everybody create some new figures, and literally they couldn't get into the bad guy's little hideout. There wasn't much of a hideout. I mean, they were just getting beat by these total pogues. So it was a lot of fun, but also frustrating at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun to go back and revisit those. But yeah, Harn is incredible just for the amount of stuff that they put out.
Backstory.
The
world itself. The world.
You can buy a thick-ass book for every little principality, and it'll tell you this village, who's in charge of that village, what they make, a little backstory within it, so if you travel
Pretty
there.
Crazy.
They had a big book that I bought just for the castles in it, because they went through and they did all their research, and there's you want 50 different castle layouts. It's in there, sort of thing. So.
Yeah. And they actually had a little miniatures game, kind of maybe like a little simplified version called Bloodlust.
Yes, I had that too. It was weird. It came with this slick, squishy kind of outline, but it was coil bound, but it had this thing on the outside. The same thing. It had a bunch of backstory stuff in it too, but also brutal.
Yeah.
And very specific about, you got hit in the left arm. You got,
Yeah. Harn had something or Harnmaster had something like 23 hit locations or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just crazy.
Good God.
Yeah. But so it was you could get hit in the hand, the lower arm, the elbow, the upper arm, the shoulder. That was and that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You don't really need to do that. It was just
and then they were specific about what injury would come about hitting in those places. But at the same time, like I said, you didn't get in fights that often. Well,
you tried not to.
And you realize that I don't want to get in a fight anymore. So
yeah.
Not if you're going to spend an hour and a half trying to find out where in the hell you got hit.
Brutal, brutally realistic. Yeah, that's just they carried it too far. Yeah,
I still love their stuff, and it's a lot of times it's dirt cheap. I went to Gen Con a couple of years ago, and they had a booth, and I bought a ridiculous amount of stuff for almost nothing. I think they were just trying to get rid of it, and that's where I got my poster and stuff. But back to Pulp Alley.
Okay.
I know we talked about how Pulp Alley encompasses really a lot of different genres within that sort of umbrella, and also the fact that a lot of people have taken it and used it for a bunch of different periods. But do you have any plans to do anything very specific or do something different?
Not anytime soon.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
What was that?
I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, yeah, and I do like the setting, the period that we're doing, and it doesn't mean that we don't do other stuff.
Yeah.
We do plenty of other stuff. It's just that this is what we mostly play.
Yeah.
So, a samurai setting has always been on the book.
Yeah.
A Western setting has always been on the book as far as to-do list. A post-apocalypse setting has always been on the to-do list. But as time has gone on, I've pretty much kind of focused what I see as the 1930s. But every one of those books, Perilous Island and Tomb of the Serpent and Vice Alley, people take those books and put them in other genres too. Like they'll reskin Vice Alley for a Star Wars game.
Or like a cyberpunk kind of thing. Easily done.
So it's not out of the question that we'll do like some specific setting things in the future. Because, I like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same wavelength, because that's exactly how I feel. I mean, I did the core book because I didn't want people to be reinventing the wheel every time I came out with supplements. And the supplements are just the flash for the rules that they already are. And I'm the same way with you. I see a movie and I want to do a new book for it, but I don't want to have to rewrite it every time. And I'm not rewriting. It's the same book.
If I do something, it'll probably be more like a campaign. If we do a samurai book, it'll probably be a few pages of extra abilities or special rules for that setting, and then the rest of it will probably be scenarios and stuff like that. So
that's exactly what I was thinking, because I'm doing one too. But but talking about taking scenarios and stuff, like I had done a whole campaign for Galactic Heroes, and a guy took it and put it in medieval Japan.
Yeah, how cool is that?
And took the crash landing of the ship in the first scenario and made it a shipwreck of Portuguese traders on the shore, and instead of running around trying to get parts to repair stuff, he made it so they were
very cool.
Samurai faction.
Very cool.
And, so it's all about getting people to take what you've already got and try to figure out what to do. So,
and I write so slow anyway. I'm lucky to get a book out a year almost. Time is getting harder and harder for me to work on stuff.
Yep. Yeah, especially, I mean, you do a ton of extra stuff like the videos and all that kind of stuff, and it just makes it. And as we discussed, you have a small child, which takes up
we have
a
2-year-old now, so I basically turned into a full-time stay-at-home father that once in a while gets to work on gaming stuff. So he is my full-time job now.
Pretty much. That's how it is. I came to it sort of late after my kids were already on their way. So, any advice for people who want to write their own sort of rule book, or not rule book, but just their own rule system, and try to, how to, even if they're not publishing it, but how they should get started, at least.
Just get started and realize that it doesn't have to be perfect. The terrible thing is, for us, I spent 3 years working on Pulp Alley before it was released. So just like tons of play testing, and I've had to come to the understanding of my own limitations and my own, blind spots, and to take advice from other people. Because if you sometimes I'll design a rule and we'll sit down at the table and try to play it, and it's like, what the hell was that? That doesn't work, and you don't find that stuff out sometimes until you're actually at the table and playing.
Yeah.
And right now in our environment, absolutely any Joe Schmo can throw together a PDF in a week or so and throw it up on War Games Vault
Yep.
Put a cool cover on it. Put some cool keywords in there. Cthulhu, horror, things like that. Space.
Yeah,
and put it
exactly.
up for sale, and people are going to buy it.
Yep.
But
I see it all the time because I fell
eventually,
for it. I fall because I'm a rules whore. I'll fall for it every time too. So
Yeah.
you need to have people in your gaming group or people in your playtest group that are brutally honest. We've got a couple of people who are great rules breakers and that are a little find it and tear it apart kind of a thing.
Yep.
So
I
have that.
I had a great group of playtesters that playtested Pulp Alley, every week, and very frequently changes were made based on how they were playing and what they were gravitating to. Oh, that ability is too tough. I need to fix that a little bit. One thing you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to touch on it because I just thought of it again. That Pulp Alley doesn't really have any weapons in it. Like, you don't say whether or not my character has a 45 or a 38 or whatever. And it's part of my belief that it is truly comes down to the skill of the person that really matters in a fight. And there's a lot of fun stuff on the internet about, spears and swords and all this sort of stuff and which weapon is better. And a lot of times, I still say that it really comes down to the skill of the fighter that's going to determine whether or not you're going to.
You can give somebody a pistol, but if they've never used one before, they're not going to be as good as the guy who is a gunslinger all the time.
Mila was a heck of a shot with a 38, but she couldn't hit a darn thing with my 45, so it's not about, the pistol. It's about the person and what they're comfortable with and what they're used to. Very frequently is what's going to have the determining factor there. And it took me a long time to come to that conclusion because I loved weapon charts and I love weapons. I love them still today. I love weapons. But so I would frequently buy games based on their weapon list and how long they were. Oh, look at this. It's got 3 pages. This one's got 5 pages of weapons. It's even got a bolo. It's like,
I mean, that's why I have weapons in mind, but a pistol's a pistol's a pistol. Submachine gun's a submachine. And I realized that the Thompson was used differently and did different things than an MP40. But for our table and for our narrative, and because I've chosen to make it Hollywood and not history, a gun is a gun is a gun kind of a thing. And
from one person to the next, they're going to use it differently.
Exactly.
Like, I have one person that carries a Thompson and he likes to just spray it. So he uses the long burst when he sprays it. I have another character that he has an increase to his shoot skill because he's more uses it to pinpoint the exact thing that he's trying to shoot at. So different characters use those weapons differently. They don't all have to be the same. And one of them that got to me was a whip. And we have the Indiana Jones just always has that whip. But just because he does X, Y, and Z with a whip does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that if somebody else picked up a whip that they were going to be able to do the same thing. That's just silly. It just doesn't really work.
All right, we had a couple of questions here for you. So, Dave, Saturday morning cartoons or late night creature features?
I'd say Saturday morning cartoons until I was about 10, and then after that, it was the late night creature features.
Well, as we'll be playing a Masters Universe game on Friday or Saturday, I guess I'm still in the cartoon.
It'll be Saturday.
Yeah. And Steve, someone asked if that was a rock you paint on, and I'm like, no, it's a big sponge.
No, it is not a sponge. This is years and years. This weighs probably about 20 pounds.
I think they're talking about what you're resting your hand on.
Oh, this is a sponge, but my palette.
That's just dried acrylic.
This is dried acrylic on top of what used to be just a thin piece of acetate. And this is years and years of paint on there. So I can tell what's wet on there.
What's a wet palette? Fuck that. Okay. So here's another question for you, us both, I guess. When designing your games, you intend to keep it more narrative, so it would play more like an RPG. That's my intention. I always tell people, make it about the story. You know, if you're planning to do it, I don't make mine to be a competition game, and I don't think you do either. So
no.
And I think you put a lot of thought into your scenarios. So especially if you link the scenarios and you keep the same characters, I think it's definitely all about, for me anyway, it's about the story. You know, you've got mechanisms in your game too for not just fighting, but for solving puzzles, for making plot points, for having to solve problems.
I think
one of the key mechanics is drawing the card and finding out, am I solving this with strength or with brains, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Steve touched on the plot point idea early on, and that's really, you know, these markers that are out here on the table. These are the actual objectives of the scenario, and those are the things that are really going to determine who wins and who loses this, if that's important to you. But just shooting up the other side isn't going to make, you know, isn't going to win you the game. Maybe it's how you achieve a victory. You know, it's like playing football, and one team is going to play extra rough, you know, rough up the other side to help them score. But at the end of the day, if the other team scores more goals, it doesn't matter, you know, how rough you played. I think just last Sunday, there was an example of that. You know, one of the leagues finished the game they started with 3 characters at the beginning, and they only, I guess on the last turn, they did lose 1 character right there at the last. The other league started with 5 characters and lost 3 of them and only finished with 2 characters on the table. So they definitely lost more characters, but they ended up winning because maybe they stayed focused on what the objective was.
Yeah, and I think a way around that is making linked games, which I know isn't always easy with a one-off, because you're not willing to let your team get that shoot up. And then also, I think time limits are good. Most of your games are, you know, 6 turns and then maybe a 7th or an 8th. And so just standing there duking out, you're going to waste a lot of time just standing there blazing away when you're really supposed to be doing that. And then back to just the shoot 'em up, you've got several scenarios that have nothing to do with fighting.
Yes, there are. We call those social scenarios, and it goes back, Jay, to my Pendragon days.
Exactly.
Remember the winter feasts and things like that in Pendragon.
You had to like make connections. You had to woo someone.
Court, and you'd have to, you know, go around and talk to different, you know, other nobles and things like that. It's that sort of idea where it's a situation. This scenario that I have set up right here is almost a social scenario, because it's at an airport and the French authorities have a bunch of French soldiers at the airport. So if you start fighting, you're going to get the French authorities after you as well.
Yep. And I remember that scenario from Pendragon, because it was like, you know, you had to schmooze somebody here, and then you had to woo someone, and then you had to fighting was going to get you in a lot of trouble. You know? You might be able to get somebody in the corner, nobody's looking, and pound them in the face, but you drew swords, you've effectively lost. You know, the king's going to call everybody to round you up. So, Ken said, you know, scenarios are what really make the games. And to me, I don't like a slugfest. Even when we play like big battles, we always have very specific plot to the whole thing. So it's rarely just let's get a bunch of guys and try to chew each other up. You know, it's like we've done even our massive Star Wars games. We've had it so your group has to do this and your group has to do that. And if you have to fight your way to get there, that could be part of it. But there's always a way you can get there without fighting if you're smart. Most of the time, about 3 turns in, everybody's had a little too much to drink and they just want to kill each other. So it doesn't it all. But at least I try.
Yep. That
So,
makes sense.
if anybody, we're getting down here a little like last 10 minutes or so. So if anybody has any specific questions for me or especially for Dave, because you can ask questions of me anytime we're on here. So if you've got anything for him, please post them here. Last couple minutes that we got, because he's a busy man. So, but I'm glad you could come on here with us, and then I definitely still want to get together and play some games, because I haven't played Pulp Alley in a long while, and it's not because I haven't wanted to. It's just like I said,
I know we get into our silos, and
I got way too many people. I got 3 hours to do it in. We have played with a bunch of people on like a couple of Saturdays where we had some time to really sit down and enjoy it. But for the most part, I gotta knock it out. But and if anybody listening,
I need to get the solo stuff.
Yeah, and anybody that's watching, I'll say it again. Check out the Pulp Alley YouTube channel. He's got unbelievable amounts of content on there, not even just stuff on building, not necessarily about the game. And then also he breaks down each kind of part of the game mechanics too. So there's a whole video just on doing hand-to-hand combat and just a whole one about plot points and things like that. So something I need to do, but I just don't feel like it.
So one thing I liked to do also was, and I think it was Steve that mentioned it, that a lot of times the plot points have different things different challenges that you can complete them. So when you go up to, you're searching for this crate over here, one of the first things that you do is you have to flip over the card to find out what kind of challenge it is. And it's going to list either might, finesse, or cunning normally. So, and that represents different ways that you could go about completing that challenge. Maybe it's might because that crate is buried under another crate that's extra heavy and you got to pull it loose. Maybe it's finesse, maybe that's just like luck. Oh, there it is right there. Or maybe it's cunning, it's like, oh, we got to check for the right label, so.
Yeah. And it's all in how you interpret it. That's why I like it. So.
Exactly.
And you use the strength of that particular character. So if, I got a guy who's really strong, then that's what I'm going to use. So that guy would have, in that situation, just gone over and tried to, lift it out of the way, where someone who's a little bit more smart might have, instead of trying to do that, actually looked for the label or, searching around. So in your head, you can make a little story. And I think that's what makes it fun in any of these kind of skirmish level games is the story that comes out of it and the little moments like that pop up that, sometimes even your best laid plans fall apart, or the story that revolves around some character that probably should have ever survived, but somehow managed to to pull it off.
Those are the good stories too. Yeah, those are the good stories.
Yeah, so
very cool. Big thank you, Jay and Steve, for letting me come on here and chat with you guys for a little bit.
Sure. We'll stay on with you here a few minutes after we end the broadcast. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm going to try to do more with makers like yourself, because I always find it fascinating. Most of us seem to have got into this very similarly, but then how we approached it and where it kind of ended up, I think, are different things, and just meeting the different kind of the personalities of the people who are doing this, and YouTube's been great to kind of give access to average person, because how often you get to talk to the people that make the games, that you may love. So I think that's awesome, and really appreciate you coming on, especially kind of at short notice. So. All right, everybody that's watching us, make sure you check out Pulp Alley. Make sure you check out our games, like this video, subscribe as much as you can. Dave doesn't need your followers. He's got thousands. I do, though.